Tartessos, the lost civilization of Iberian gold. What if one of the ancient world's wealthiest civilizations vanished so completely that we still can't agree on where it stood, what language its people spoke, or even whether it was a city, a kingdom, or something else entirely? That civilization is Tartessos. Between the 9th and 6th centuries BCE, roughly 3,000 years ago, it thrived in the southern Iberian Peninsula, in the region we now call Andalusia. Tartessos was no backwater. The Greek geographer Strabo, writing in his Geographica around 20 BCE, described it as fabulously wealthy, a place where silver ran so deep that Phoenician merchants, unable to carry it all home, allegedly replaced their lead anchors with silver ones. That wealth was real, and it was geological. Tartessos sat atop one of the richest mineral belts in the ancient world, deposits of silver, gold, and tin that powered its economy for centuries. Tartessos didn't emerge in isolation. It formed from a fusion of indigenous Iberian peoples and arriving colonizers, Phoenician traders from the Levant, and later Greek merchants from the eastern Mediterranean. The Phoenicians established Gadir, modern Cadiz, around 1100 BCE, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in Western Europe. That settlement became the commercial bridge between Tartessos and the wider Mediterranean world. Tartessos didn't just supply raw metal. It controlled the entire western end of a trade network stretching from the Atlantic coast to the Aegean Sea, a corridor that archaeologist Maria Eugenia Albet, in her study of Phoenician expansion, characterizes as spanning well over 2,000 kilometers of active commercial reach. Tartessian craftspeople weren't simply miners. Their metalworking reached a level of sophistication that still commands attention in major collections. The Carambolo treasure, discovered in 1958 near Seville and now held at the Archaeological Museum of Seville, includes 21 gold pieces of such geometric precision that its excavators initially debated whether it could be Phoenician rather than indigenous work. One of the clearest windows into Tartessian life is the Guadiana Valley in Extremadura. Archaeological finds there reveal it functioned simultaneously as a trade corridor and a center of religious worship. Despite all of this, Tartessos left behind almost no written records of its own. Everything we know comes filtered through outsiders, Greeks and Romans, writing about a place most of them had never visited. That scarcity of records has fed centuries of speculation. The most persistent claim: Tartessos was Atlantis, the legendary drowned civilization Plato described around 360 BCE. It's a compelling story. It's also unsupported by a single piece of archaeological evidence. Plato invented Atlantis as a philosophical allegory, a morality tale about hubris and collapse. Tartessos was a real, archaeologically attested civilization. Conflating the two tells us more about our appetite for mystery and about the historical record. The actual mystery of Tartessos is harder than any myth. Around 500 BCE, after 3 centuries of documented prosperity, the civilization simply stops appearing in the archaeological record. No catastrophic destruction layer, no mass grave, it just ends. That disappearance happened roughly 2,500 years ago. To put that in scale, Tartessos was already ancient history by the time Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Rome knew it only as a legend. Scholars have proposed 3 plausible explanations for the disappearance. The first, trade network collapse. Carthage rose to dominate Western Mediterranean commerce in the 6th century BCE, systematically cutting off the Phoenician-Tartessian axis that had powered the civilization. The second explanation is environmental. Pollen and sediment analysis from Laguna de Medina, a lake near Jerez de la Frontera, studied by palynologist Francisca Alba Sanchez and her colleagues, indicates significant aridification in southern Iberia during the late 6th century BCE, a drying trend that would have stressed an agricultural base already stretched by population growth. The third explanation may be the most counterintuitive. Tartessos didn't necessarily die. It may have transformed. Absorbed into emerging Iberian cultures, its people and practices continued under different names, invisible to the Greek writers who had catalogued it. But here's the methodological problem. When a civilization leaves sparse records, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. We can't distinguish between a culture that collapsed and one that simply stopped being legible to outside observers. Recall that extraordinary mineral wealth. That same wealth may have made Tartessos a target. As Carthage consolidated power, controlling Iberian silver and tin became a strategic military priority, not just a commercial one. This is the core insight Tartessos offers. Civilizations built on a single resource advantage, mineral wealth, a strategic location, a dominant trade route, aren't more resilient for their prosperity. They're more fragile, because their survival depends on conditions they can't control. This pattern recurs throughout history. The Akkadian Empire's contraction around 2200 BCE was accelerated by the 4.2 kiloyear aridification event, a hypothesis advanced by archaeologist Harvey Weiss, though still debated. The Dutch Golden Age contracted as spice trade monopolies eroded. Tartessos fits a recognizable template: peak wealth followed by structural vulnerability. Trade networks aren't neutral infrastructure. They're political constructions that collapse when their backing power withdraws. Around 480 BCE, Carthage imposed effective control over the Strait of Gibraltar, blocking independent Greek and Phoenician access to Gadir. Ancient sources, including Pseudo-Silax, record that Carthaginian warships turned back foreign vessels attempting to pass westward. When that choke point closed, Tartessos lost the external demand that had sustained its silver economy for 3 centuries. The Guadiana Valley, that hub of Tartessian trade and worship, didn't become an empty wasteland after 500 BCE. It continued to be inhabited, but by people archaeologists classify under entirely different cultural labels. Which raises a genuinely uncomfortable question. How much of what we call civilizational collapse is actually a naming problem? When outsiders stop applying a label, did the people themselves experience a catastrophe, or simply continue living under new political arrangements? Tartessian metalworking traditions didn't vanish overnight. Techniques identifiable as Tartessian in origin appear in later Iberian and Celtiberian artifacts well into the 4th century BCE, a quiet form of cultural continuity that the written record entirely misses. Tartessos also forces a reckoning with how we construct historical knowledge. The civilizations that survive in memory aren't necessarily the most consequential. They're the ones that left writing, or that were written about by literate neighbors. The Indus Valley civilization, home to perhaps 5 million people at its peak around 2500 BCE, remains poorly understood precisely because its script has never been deciphered. Tartessos faces the same wall of silence, and for the same reason, literate neighbors, not its own scribes, decided what mattered. Archaeological work in Andalusia and Extremadura continues to refine the picture. Sites like Concho Roano in Extremadura, a Tartessian palatial sanctuary, have yielded enough material to confirm the civilization's sophistication, even as they deepen the central mystery. Every civilization at its peak believes its arrangements are durable. At Concho Roano, Excavators found the sanctuary was deliberately sealed and buried around 400 BCE, its contents interred as if in a formal ending. Someone chose to close it. That deliberate act of closure, not a destruction layer, is what the archaeology shows. Whoever made that decision believed they were ending something. Here's what we still genuinely don't know: whether Tartessos had a capital city. Scholars have proposed the mouth of the Guadalquivir River as the most likely site, but no confirmed urban center has been excavated. The city, if it existed, may lie under the Atlantic marshes. If the capital does lie beneath the Doñana marshes, it would rank among the most significant archaeological discoveries in European history. The fact that we haven't found it isn't evidence it didn't exist. It's evidence of how much the past still hides from us. We began by asking how a civilization could vanish so completely we can't even locate its center. Here's what the archaeology delivers. The Carambolo treasure sat undiscovered in a rabbit warren on the outskirts of Seville until 1958. A civilization's most celebrated artifacts were hiding in a hillside burrow. If its gold was that close and that hidden, its capital may be closer than we think. The real lesson of Tartessos is this: the civilizations we remember are accidents of documentation, and the ones we've lost are a warning. Wealth buys time, but it doesn't buy permanence, and the most powerful empires are always one disrupted trade route from silence. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more.